When I followed the blood trail into the Archer place, I thought I was walking into another junkie drama, bad decisions, and a worse ending. I didn't expect to find my kids' photos on the wall. Not school portraits you could brush off as lifted from social media. No, candid shots no one else should have had. Ethan at the batting cages, chewing his lower lip like he does when he's concentrating. Maya asleep on the couch with a marker still in her hand. Private moments. My moments. If I'd been any other man, I might have fallen to my knees. But I'm a cop, and cops move. Dispatch spun me here on a 911 about a dark liquid on the sidewalk, the kind of delicate phrasing people use when their stomach is ahead of their eyes. The Archer house sits on a block that even a male runs past. Windows punched out, porch collapsed on the east side, an address the city condemned after a fire gutted 5 years ago. We use it in training to talk about line of sight and bad approaches. Tonight, dust pressed low, and the smell hit before the light did. Iron and rot, and the old mold that clings to dead wood. Unit 12 on scene, I told them my possible injured party. Blood trail from curb to structure. Send me another car and a bus to stage 2 blocks out. Copy, 12. Nearest unit 12 minutes. Use caution. 12 minutes is a long time when someone is leaking life onto the concrete. I followed the smear up the steps, noting the pattern, drag, set, drag, like a 3-legged animal or a person with a bad foot. The boards were already pried off the front door, nails left in curlicues that could open a vein if you breathed wrong. I used my left shoulder, pushed through, and kept my right side free. My flashlight washed the floor in a cone of cold light. Busted banister, a storm of drywall dust, spray paint on the far wall that said keep out a hand I recognized from a dozen juvenile arrests in this precinct. The blood went right. It had already started to darken at the edges, but it hadn't gone brown. 20, maybe 30 minutes old. You learn to clock the way it skins over. I stepped wide of the footprints. Men's size, cheap tread, a shallow heel. Someone else's pattern overlaid them, smaller, smoother, maybe a woman's flats, maybe a kid's sneaker. My jaw tightened at that. I told the fear to get in line behind the training. It listened. Police? I called, low but clear. If you can hear me, answer. I'm here to help. No answer, just a drip somewhere deep in the house and the tick of my own pulse where my vest hugged my ribs. On the kitchen threshold, I saw the kind of thing that makes rookies throw up. A swipe of red at hip height, the kind you make when you steady yourself on a wall. But the pool on the warped vinyl beneath, it was smaller than it should have been. Stage? Diluted? The copper smell was real, but there was something sweeter under it, like antifreeze. A bad recipe if someone wanted to fake a crime scene. Or a good one if they wanted to slow down a bloodhound. I reported what I had and edged deeper. My boot nudged a glass jar, and the flashlight caught the glitter of pins inside. Safety, sewing, a few long industrial needles, all clean. The lid bore a strip of masking tape. Thread the needle, daddy, in a looping, childish scrawl. My throat went tight. Maya's first-grade teacher had sent a craft kit home last month, and she'd written the same phrase on a sticky note for me. I could see it as plain as if it weren't being dragged through my worst night. I didn't say my kids' names on the radio. You learn not to write your loved ones into the log. But I pressed my emergency key twice, silent signal, and key my mic control, add a welfare check to the queue. I said, giving an address I've known longer than my badge number. Code 1. No lights. Put a senior officer on it. Copy. Dispatching now. The hallway narrowed. Someone had stapled sheets over the doorways, thin fabric that moved with my breath. My light snagged on a nail head, and for a second the beam split and made ghosts of the dust. Past the dining room. Chair legs upturned like insects and into what used to be a den. That's when my world tilted. On the far wall, where fire had licked away the paint and left raw lath, someone had built a grid with blue painter's tape. In each square, a photo, some printed on glossy paper, some Polaroids, some grainy phone screenshots. All of them my kids. Ethan in his Little League uniform, throwing a pitch. Maya in a dinosaur hoodie, chasing our cat around the coffee table. A shot of the two of them at the park. Maya on the swing. Ethan pushing her with that big brother boredom that never quite hides a pride. Dates in the corner. Times. My off days circled in red marker. My patrol route sketched in pencil beneath, tidy neat. There are moments in this job where you feel the floor drop and keep walking anyway. I stepped closer and saw a photo I hadn't taken. Ethan leaving school on Tuesday, backpack slung off one shoulder. Another of Maya at the produce stand, scrunching her nose at broccoli. I read the timestamp. Yesterday, 3:17 p.m. The angle was from a car across the street. My skin went cold. I don't remember dialing, but I had my personal phone out, thumb hovering over my ex-wife's contact. I stopped. You don't call a mother to spin her world if you can help it. You make sure first. You put a car on the house and a human at the door. You take a breath and do the thing you were trained to do. I put the phone away and lifted my camera instead, documenting the board, the tape, the handwriting block letters, left-leaning slant, the way the maker dotted eyes with short slashes like tiny graves. Under the grid, pinned with a pushpin that had been under the wood, and held anyway. There was a note on a receipt, my own voice in my head, reading it before I understood the words. Are you paying attention now? Below that, a second line, written smaller. Bring them home. I swept the room again because that's how you survive the trap you didn't know you stepped in. The blood trail threaded past the photo wall and up the back stairs, small, sharp smears on the banister, like fingertips. From above, the house gave a tired groan. Old wood shifts. Old houses talk. But then a sound cut through. Soft, tinny, a tune you don't hear unless you stood in the doorway and watched your daughter fall asleep to it. The toy music box, the one she winds 3 times and holds under her chin like a secret, played its 4-bar song and clicked. Control, I said, and my voice didn't shake. I have indication of a specific threat to my family. Maintain radio discipline. Confirm status on the welfare check. Unit on scene in 3. Dispatch said, do you want a call made? Negative. Knock and eyes only. No chatter. I climbed. Each step sounded like a decision. On the landing, the smell deepened. That metallic edge wrapped around a sweetness that turned my stomach. The music box clicked once more and died. My light caught a door at the end of the hall, half open, a line of dull red seeping beneath it. The gap was black, like a pupil. I trained my gun on the hinge side, angled off, and used my foot to nudge the door wider. The room breathed out at me. Colder air, a whisper curtain. On the ceiling, strips of reflective tape made star shapes that threw my beam back in a constellation of hard points. In the center of the floor sat a burner phone on top of a child's lunchbox. My son's name was scrawled on the lid. The phone vibrated and lit up unknown number. As it rang, the screensaver cycled to a photo. My kids on the first day of school, their arms around each other, smiling at me, at the future I promised them. The call rolled to voicemail, and in the same breath, my radio crackled on an open channel. A voice I knew better than my own, pitched higher by fear and static, whispered into the empty house. Dad! The voice hit me in the soft place I keep triple-locked. Thin, breathy, like she was trying not to make a sound at all. Dad! Then static, a carrier tone, and dead air. Not the phone, my radio. Someone was keying up on our channel with my daughter's voice. Control, declare 10-3 on primary. I said, calm because it matters. Hold the air except priority traffic. Confirm status of the welfare check. Primary is 10-3. Unit 23 is at the residence. A half beat. I could hear wind, a hand over a mic, then a familiar baritone. 12-23. Visual on adult female, and 2 juveniles at your listed address. They are inside, lights on. All code 4. I let a fraction of breath out. Ethan and Maya at home. My ex-wife, too. Okay. Then who and how? Put her voice on my radio. The burner phone vibrated again. A thin bug on a lunchbox. Unknown number. I put it on speaker, watched the seconds tick. On the second ring, it answered itself with a click. For a moment there was only room tone. The hum of an old refrigerator. A far freeway. A breath not mine. You're late, a man said. It wasn't a voice so much as a decision about a voice, flattened, run through a cheap filter. I pictured a hardware store mask and a phone held in gloved fingers. You made me repeat the first line. Unprofessional. I kept my radio angled away and my phone near the mic, so if this went bad, someone could pick up what I was hearing. This is Unit 12. Identify yourself. You already did, he said, amused. Unit 12. Husband once. Father twice. Midnight shift 3 out of 7. Archer House lecturer. No cover on approach, no concealment in retreat. You were very good that day. He'd sat in on our training, or watched the video we send to rookies. A listener, a note-taker. I looked at the grid of photos, at the neat tape corners, and believed it. You have 5 minutes before your backup kills your scene with their heavy feet. He went on. I'll be finished by then. What do you want? Attention, he said simply, and to see whether you can do your job without the net you always keep under you. A small sound in the background, fabric against wood. Start by opening the lunchbox. I angled to the side, kept the beam off my body, and knelt. The lid had my son's name scrawled in marker. The cap smudged the way his thumb smudges everything. I used my knife to pop the latch, then my flashlight to flood the interior. On top was a music box, its ballerina bent, a hairline crack in the case. Under it, a folded city map with green highlighter bleeding through. Beneath that, a key on a brass tag stamped 3C. Slowly, the voice said, You rush when you're scared. Slow down. Say another word and I'll triangulate your. He laughed softly. You'll ask your friend to ping a phone that isn't mine on a tower that's already bored of me. You'll remember belatedly that nobody triangulates in real time in this city. And you'll keep talking because the silence scares you as much as darkness. Something else lay under the key. I teased it out with the tip of my knife. A Polaroid, face down. When I flipped it, I was looking at the outside of my house. The angle was from the alley, over the fence, the sliding glass door. Maya's unicorn sticker glowed, white against the glass. Overlaid in marker, a simple smiley face and a time, 1911. I checked my watch. 1908. You think you're clever, I said, voice flat to hide the spike of fear. I think you're predictable, he said. 3 minutes. Let's see if you earn the next part. Go upstairs. Second room on the right. Don't touch the doorknob. I moved. My light rode the walls. Found the banister smears again. The small fingerprints staggered like someone learning to walk. Halfway up, the beam caught something spider-thin across the stairs. Monofilament. Strung ankle height. Tied a screw eye on one side and a tin of ball bearings on the other. Not enough to maim. Enough to send a man and his gun tumbling. I snipped it with my knife. Caught the tin before it rattled. You decorate with fishing line now? Everybody shops the same hardware aisle, he said, mildly pleased. Keep going. At the landing, I smelled again, that sweetness hiding in the metal. I let my light go soft at the edges, widen my sight. Second room on the right. The door stood open half an inch. Paint blistered, a shadow cutting the crack. An old trick. Put something just inside the door to catch on the floor. I crouched, angled the beam low. Found what I expected. A wire coat hanger just beyond the jamb, bent into a shepherd's hook, attached to a nail. If you yanked the door straight, it would drag across the floor and clang like a drop cymbal. I slipped my fingers in, lifted, eased it free, set it aside. Then I used my boot to push the door open along the hinge line. It was a child's room once. The wallpaper had trains marching to nowhere. The mattress was gone, but the frame remained, springs like a rib cage. In the center, on a stool, a small radio, cheap handheld, sat with press-to-talk taped down by a wide strip of blue tape. Next to it, a digital recorder, the kind you buy at a drugstore, its speaker aimed at the radio. It had a single file loaded, queued to the first second. The label on the recorder's screen said MAY_1.wave. My throat went dry. You like the demo? The voice asked. I paid $2 at a thrift store for radio. Did you know how easy it is to sound like God if you know which channel to whisper into? What's the key for? I asked to keep my brain from following the thought barreling toward it. "Downstairs," he said. "Southeast corner. You have 2 minutes." I backed out. On the landing, my radio popped. 12:24 arriving on your location. Staging 2 blocks out. "Hold your position," I said. "Kill sirens. No foot unless I call you." "Copy." I went back down, past the wall of my life cut into squares, past the kitchen where the blood had turned sticky. Southeast corner meant the small utility room near the back door. The door was old and swollen, paint scabbed. On the jamb, someone had traced a crude height chart in pencil. Old names, old summers. Under those numbers, a fresh mark with today's date in 2 letters, E and M. The tip of my knife picked at the paint around the lock until my fingers got the feel for it. I used the brass key. It slid in clean and turned like a secret kept too long. The room was barely big enough for a water heater and regret. The heater had been pulled a foot away from the wall. On the drywall behind it, a small square had been cut out and rehung, the edges disguised by dust. I leaned close. 4 screws at the corners, new metal gleaming in the beam, heads chewed by a screwdriver that didn't fit. I found purchase and turned. The panel came away in my hand. Behind it, a cavity, nest of wires, a cheap camera pointed outward, a shortwave antenna, and a box no bigger than a paperback with a blinking green light. Someone had built themselves a little ear inside the house. A printed label on the box said in neat letters, "Are you paying attention now?" My phone breathed. 1 minute, he said. "You do good work when it's your skin." "If this is about a case," I said, finally giving him a path, "I'll read it. I'll reopen it. We'll fix what was broken." The words tasted like lies and duty. I would do it if it meant separating my family from his game. "Tell me which case." "Not yet," he said, and the softness dropped out his tone. "You don't get to assume this is about you because you carry a badge. Sometimes it's about force and friction, and the way a man learns where your kids go after school because you've looked through his windows, too." Under the camera, taped to the inside of the cutout, was another Polaroid just beginning to ghost an image onto itself. I watched the gray resolve into shape, me, kneeling at the lunchbox, my light cutting across my own shoulder. My stomach turned. "Turn around," he said. I did, slowly. On the outer wall, a faint blue laser had bloomed, jittering like a heartbeat on the center of my chest where the vest's fabric meets skin. It tracked when I shifted. It held when I went still. "You have 12 seconds, he said, and for the first time there was something like excitement in the machine of his voice. "Choose which you want more, the man you pretend to be or the father you used to be." The dot stayed on me, trembling like it was breathing with me. My heart was hammering against the vest, not because of the rifle. I'd faced down guns before, but because of the voice's last words. "The father you used to be." He'd studied me long enough to know what to press on. Maria leaving. My missed birthdays. Ethan's team photo with a blank spot where I should have been. He wanted me rattled. He almost had me. I raised my hands just enough to show I wasn't reaching for anything. "You've made your point," I said, keeping my voice flat, steady. "You got my attention. What's next?" The dot jittered, then disappeared like someone had pulled a finger off a trigger. My ears strained for a window latch, a floorboard, some clue. Nothing but the hum of the old house settling around me. Then the burner phone buzzed again. I put it on speaker without touching it, the way you pet a rattlesnake. His voice came through, calm and almost warm. "Good. You passed the first test. Most men rush the red dot. You listened. That's why you're still useful." "What test? What do you want from me?" "You'll find part 2 where you'd least like to look," he said. "Back upstairs, top floor. Follow the train wallpaper. Don't call your friends yet. Let them think you're methodical, clearing room by room. You know the drill. If they storm in early, this ends with a body bag. Not yours." I keyed my radio, using the code we reserve for surveillance situations. "Control, I'm continuing to clear structure. No additional units until further notice." "Copy 12. Dispatch answered, none the wiser. My backup sat 2 blocks away, restless, probably listening to my heartbeat in every word. They didn't know I was inside a chess match. I climbed again, each step a measured beat. The top floor was worse. More collapse, plaster littering the floor, the sweet metal smell stronger, like it had been soaked into the wood. The train wallpaper he mentioned led down a narrow hallway. Some cars had been drawn on with crayon long ago, maybe by a kid who once lived here. Now the ink bled into water stains. At the end of the hall was a door painted blue. I tested it with the back of my hand. Cold, no vibration, no static electricity, like a rigged shock. I pressed the edge with my boot. It groaned open. My light swept inside. The attic had been transformed into a shrine. Not to God, not to some celebrity, but to me. The walls were plastered with articles. Old clippings about arrests I'd made, grainy photos from press conferences, even a piece and spoken review about a burglary I'd solved 6 years ago. Each article was annotated with red pen, circling dates, times, names. In the middle of the room, nailed to the support beam, was my old academy graduation photo. They'd drawn a red X through my partner's face. That partner had been killed in the line of duty 4 years ago. I felt my jaw clench. Whoever this was, they weren't just watching me. They'd been cataloging me, dissecting my career like a specimen. And then my light hit something worse. On the far wall, in a neat rectangle, were pictures of Ethan and Maya again. But these weren't stolen from social media or snapped from across the street. These were school ID style, clean backgrounds, cropped tight. I'd never seen them before. Below each photo was a line of text in block letters. Height, weight, blood type. My son's soccer schedule pinned underneath. My daughter's ballet recital flyer. He had their lives mapped out like case notes. The phone vibrated in my pocket. Unknown number. I let it ring. On the 5th vibration, it picked up by itself. His voice slid out, close, almost in my ear. Now you see how much closer I am to your children than you are. Ask yourself, who deserves to keep them safe? My stomach twisted, but I forced my tone even. You don't lay a finger on my kids. Funny, he said. That's what every perp you ever cuffed said about their own families. Didn't stop you from kicking in doors at midnight, waking babies, dragging fathers down staircases in front of their wives. Tell me, Officer Flores, when you wrote those reports, did you ever picture the other side? He knew my name, not just my call sign, not just Dad. He knew exactly who I was, and he was rewriting me as the criminal in his story. I looked around the attic, trying to track his setup. A faint red light blinked from the corner. A small camera lens pointed straight at me. He was watching in real time. I gave him nothing. No flinch, no curse, no visible tell. Just turned my beam away from the lens, denying him the view. What's part 2? I asked, keeping control of my voice, if not my pulse. You'll find the envelope under your own face, he said. And remember, you're being measured. Every choice is a number in my book. I approached the academy photo. Taped behind the frame was a manila envelope. I pulled it free carefully, checking for weight. Too light for explosives. Inside was a stack of photos. The first made my throat seize. My patrol car parked in front of my house. The second, my ex-wife stepping out to check the mail, a circle drawn around her head. The third, Ethan biking down the block, unaware of the lens. The fourth, Maya asleep in her room, light from her night lamp spilling across her cheek, taken through her bedroom window. Each photo was marked with a number and a phrase. 001, door left unlocked. 002, route unchecked. 003, blind corner. 004, easy entry. He wasn't just cataloging them. He was grading me as a father, scoring my failures in red ink like a teacher correcting homework. My stomach turned. The phone whispered again. You don't protect them. You expose them. But I'll give you a chance. Because unlike you, I believe in second chances. Part 3 begins tomorrow at 1911 sharp. Same place. Bring nothing but yourself. Fail, and I send these photos to your son's school, your daughter's dance teacher, the papers. Imagine the headlines. Local officers' children under surveillance. How long before the city decides you're unfit? The line clicked dead. Silence pressed in. My light trembled once before I locked my wrist again. I stood in the middle of that attic, photos of my kids staring down at me, and I made myself a promise. This wasn't going to end with me playing his game, but to outplay him, I had to act like I believed the rules. At least for now. I called it in as nothing more than a routine sweep. Blood trail inconclusive, no injured party located. Backup arrived, stomped through, found nothing but an old squatter's den. I signed the report with steady handwriting, but I kept the envelope close, tucked inside my vest. When I drove home that night, every headlight behind me looked like a tail. Every shadow in my yard looked like it had been placed there, and when I finally stepped inside, Ethan looked up from his homework and said, "Dad, why are you home so early?" Because, son, someone out there is rewriting the story of our lives, and I just walked into the first chapter. And I don't know yet how many pages it's going to take before I can close the book. I didn't sleep. I lay on the couch with my boots on, watching the slit of light under the front door, like it might widen into a mouth. At 3:17 a.m., car rolled slow past the house and kept going. At 5:20, the garbage truck thundered down the block and rattled my ribs. At 6 o'clock, I brewed coffee strong enough to strip paint and called an early like I needed overtime. I didn't need the hours. I needed to move. I met Lena in the driveway of her townhouse before the kids were up. She opened the door with her robe clenched in one fist, hair piled on her head, eyes already reading my face. We've been divorced long enough that we don't waste time pretending we can't still read each other. "Tell me," she said. "There's a guy playing games with me." I said, "Keeping it flat. I want the kids at your sister's place for a few days. Don't tell anyone you're going. Take the long way. No posts, no check-ins." Her mouth tightened. "Is this about work or about you?" He knows our routines. I hated how small my voice felt saying it. He has photos from outside your window. Her eyes flashed bottomless and calm, the way they did when Maya split her chin and Lena held her steady while the nurse stitched. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. "You're riding with them," she said. "Then you call me when we're there, and you tell me what I'm supposed to do if he calls my phone." I shook my head. "He won't. He want me contained. You get them out. My friend will park down the road and watch the place." "You won't see her?" "Carrie?" she asked. "Yeah." I didn't add that I wasn't putting it in the system. I wasn't going to let his voice ride our radios again. By 9 o'clock, we were on the interstate. Ethan slouched in the back, earbuds in, pretending not to notice the tension braided in the car. Maya counted cows out the window until the counting turned into humming and then sleep. Lena drove. I watched the mirrors. 20 miles out, I texted Carrie one word: "Nest." She replied with a blue heart, meaning she was in position and quiet. Back in the city, I ran my own house like a scene. I checked the fence line, the alley, the shed. I found a tiny disc magnet stuck under the lip of the planter by the back steps. It had a micro lens in it the size of a pinhead. I popped it off and stuck it to the underside of my mailbox so it would keep broadcasting to an empty lawn. If he was watching, he'd keep watching. At 1800 hours, I parked 2 blocks from the Archer house and walked in with my hands where any lens could see them. No bag, no wire. I'd written my notes on the inside of my forearm in pen like a rookie. 3C key. Map, 1911. The street was colder than last night, the kind of cold that lives in your teeth. The house loomed like it resented the attention. I announced myself low for the recorder I'd left in my cruiser and slipped inside. The smell had settled into the boards now, sweet metal and old water. The trail of dried blood was darker, but there was a new line laid over it, thin and fresh as a paper cut, leading toward the kitchen and down. I found the door to the cellar under a staircase covered in gray grit. Someone had wiped a line through the dust at hip height, the same swipe pattern I'd seen yesterday. The handle turned. The first step groaned and then held. I angled my light low, sweeping for wire and glass. On the third step, a razor blade had been taped at calf height on the riser, angled to kiss skin. I peeled it off and stuck it to a beam. Somewhere in the dark a phone vibrated. 1911 stuttered across its cracked face and died. The cellar was a rectangle of damp, and 3 walls of stone that had learned how to sweat. Old shelves sagged with jars that had gone blind years ago. In the far corner, someone had painted a big blue C on a metal locker door. A small, rusty 3 had been scratched into the paint under it like an afterthought. The brass tag in my pocket read 3C. Of course it did. I used the key. Inside, a stack of VHS tapes in a cracked grocery basket, a battered DV camcorder, a ledger bound in cheap black, and a plastic bag that sloshed when I moved it. The bag was clear. The liquid inside was not. Thick, dark, clotted at the corners. Not a full gallon. A donation. My stomach folded in on itself, but I kept my hand steady and reached for the ledger. Names, dates, times. Some I recognized from the blotter. Some were political yard signs I'd driven past for 20 years. Under June 12th, 3 years ago, he'd written my last name in an intersection. Clay and Monroe, 213 Silver Coupe and O headlights. I saw like I was back there again. The couple arguing the crosswalk. The way my beam washed their anger white. The girl's lips split. The boy's fingers tight on her wrist. I'd separated them, run warrants, sent them home in separate cabs, written it up like 1,000 other nights. Next to that entry he'd written, "You looked at me and didn't see me." The phone in my pocket, his vibrated. I put it on speaker and set it on the shelf beside the ledger. "You made it," he said. The voice was closer now, the cheap filter catching on consonants. Open tape number 5. They were numbered in red marker. 5 had a loop of duct tape holding it together. My fingers remembered a VCR before my brain did. There was an old TV on a rolling cart against the wall, the kind schools throw away. I plugged it in, fed the tape, and hit play. Static, then an image bloomed, a staircase like this one. The beam of a flashlight came down the steps. I recognized the jacket before I recognized the gate. The man on the tape was me. He moved like me. He paused where I had paused, leaned where I leaned. In the top corner, a time code burned. Yesterday, 1914. He had filmed me filming his scene. "You like cinema?" he asked, amused. Watch number 8. I ejected, inserted. New static. A different angle. The alley behind my house. The camera was low, under a car. The frame held while my son's bike tires went past. Spokes a blur. The tape jumped. A hard cut to my back door sliding open. Maya's pink socks on the threshold. She never stepped outside. She stood there, sang to herself, and closed it again. The tape ended there, in a hiss. "You're building a case on me," I said, because I needed my voice to fill the room before his did. "I'm building a case for you," he said softly. "Every rule you don't break tonight earns you another minute with your children's privacy. Every rule you do break earns me a copy of your soul to show the world." I turned the ledger pages. August entry circled, a name box 3 times. Garcia Lucas. Beneath it, a line I'd written once, in a report I didn't sign with enough care. Subject non-cooperative. Released. A photocopy of my report was stapled in. He'd pulled it from somewhere. Next to it, he'd written. He called the next day. No one answered. "What is this?" I asked. "Part 3, he said, "and a test of your hearing. Do you hear what you wrote off? Do you hear it now that you're the one nobody answers?" A soft jingle interrupted him. The music box again, 3 floors up, not playback. A wind and release. Then another sound layered under it that wasn't in my house. Faint, steady, a child's recorded breathing from a cheap TV. Turn up from somewhere else in the house. It was mixed with static, but it was human enough to burrow under my vest. "Don't go rushing toward the song," he said. "You rush when you're scared. You left that scene at Clay and Monroe in 2 minutes and 17 seconds. You wrote up an argument. You never checked the alley. You never asked why his headlights were off." My jaw ached. "What do you want me to do?" "Earn the next minute," he said. "There's a crawl space door behind the shelving. Open it. You have 30 seconds to choose what to take with you, the ledger or the tapes. You can't carry both and move as quietly as I need you to. And you can't leave them. I'll burn what you abandon." A crawl space door crouched where he'd said, low and mean, that was swollen from years of damp. I tested its hinge. It sighed. Behind me, the TV hissed louder. The breathing on the tape hitched and then steadied, like a child turning over in sleep. Upstairs, the music box clicked, the last note hanging before it died. 30, he said. I put my hand on the ledger. My fingers touched the name he boxed 3 times. Then I looked at the tapes, fat with proof and angles. 1 was heavy with more than plastic. 8 was too intimate to let him keep. 5 was me. If I left it, he'd replay me until he learned a weakness even I didn't know. 20. I slid 2 tapes into my jacket, 5 and 8, and felt the pull. The ledger was a map. The tapes were a confession. Which would he expect me to value? Which would I hate myself for losing? 10. I stuffed the ledger down the back of my vest where it bit between my shoulder blades and made every breath a reminder. I left the basket of tapes on the shelf and opened the crawl space door. Cold air blew out like a sigh that I'd been holding for years. 5, he said, satisfied. Good. Now crawl. The crawl space swallowed light the way the ocean swallows stones. My beam pressed ahead barely 3 feet before the darkness crushed it. I dropped onto my elbows and knees, the ledger biting into my back through the vest, the 2 stolen tapes thudding against my ribs with each shift forward. The air was different here. Stale, sour, dust packed thick enough to coat my teeth. Somewhere behind me, the old TV kept hissing, the sound of a child's breath playing through static, chasing me into the hole. The floor was dirt, damp enough to leave mud on my gloves. Wooden beams framed the low tunnel. Someone had dragged cloth along them, stapling it at intervals. My light picked out the shapes, bed sheets, pillowcases, blankets, all mottled with dark stains. Some were old, brown, and stiff. Others glistened, still wet in places. A drip hit the crown of my hand. Cold as ice. You're still moving. The voice said from the phone in my jacket. I hadn't touched it, but it had gone live again. Good. You didn't stay to argue. Most men would. You're learning. What's in here? I asked, my throat dry. The part of you that crawls on its belly when you think no one can see. I kept moving. The tunnel angled down. My shoulder brushed something soft and I froze. Light catching on a stuffed animal. Maya's unicorn. Its fur streaked with grime. My stomach lurched until I saw the tag. Not hers. A different child's name scrawled in faded marker. The date written under it was 2 years ago. Keep going. The voice urged gentle, like a parent teaching a child to walk. You're close. The tunnel opened into a chamber no bigger than a closet. My beam found drawings taped to the walls. Crude stick figures in crayon, red wax pressed hard into paper like blood. Some were families, mom, dad, child, crossed out in thick black marker. Others were simple shapes, eyes, hands, doors. And in the center on a crate was a shoebox sealed with duct tape, a number scrawled across the lid, 1913. Open it, he said. I hesitated. My gloves hovered. Now! I peeled the tape. Inside were photographs, curled and stained at the edges. The first showed me in uniform, walking a suspect to my cruiser. The second, Lena carrying groceries, unaware of the camera. The third, Ethan asleep, mouth open, sprawled across his bed. The fourth, Maya in the bathtub, hair piled into a crown of bubbles. My chest tightened. I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. You see how naked they are? The voice whispered. You see how easy it is. I forced air into my lungs. Why them? Because they are you, he said, and you didn't guard them. You never guard what matters. I shoved the box into my vest, teeth clenched. I wasn't leaving it here. The tunnel pressed on. Another 20 feet before a ladder of rusted rungs led up to a trapdoor. I climbed, heart hammering. The wood above was newer, pale against the old beams. I pushed and it gave way. I came up in a room I didn't recognize. Not the Archer house anymore. The floorboards were cleaner, the walls intact. Furniture covered with white sheets, dust and long untouched drifts. Through the window I could see a different street. Row houses, a single lamp flickering. He'd dug a tunnel that connected one condemned house to another. My radio crackled. Unit 12, status check. Do you require additional? I killed the mic with one hand before answering. Negative. Still clearing. My voice sounded steady. My body felt like it was shaking apart. The phone buzzed again. I answered. You chose the ledger, he said, almost pleased. You carried it like a spine. Good. That means you want to understand me. That means you're ready for the next test. What's the point of this? I snapped. You want me to chase ghosts? You want me to confess to every bad call I ever made? No, he said softly. I want you to learn what it feels like to be powerless. To feel the way they felt when you didn't hear them. And when you've learned that, maybe you'll understand what comes next. The line went dead. I swept the new house quickly. Every nerve tuned for ambush. Empty. No fresh prints. Just another stage. In the parlor, on the mantel, was a Polaroid pinned under a rock. My kids again, standing in our front yard. Today's newspaper taped to the frame. A message scrawled across the bottom in block letters. Tomorrow, 1911. I pocketed it and left through the back, circling 3 blocks before heading for my cruiser. When I slid inside, I checked the rear seat twice before I let myself breathe. Back at the precinct, I logged it all as routine. Abandoned structure, no parties located, unsafe conditions noted. I kept the ledger and tapes locked in my personal cabinet. If anyone else saw them, this game would go public. And if it went public, my kids would be collateral before the first press conference ended. At home, I found myself standing in the dark outside their rooms, listening to the sound of their breathing. Safe. For now. My phone buzzed once on the nightstand. No number. Just a single text. Are you paying attention now? I didn't reply. I couldn't sleep. I sat in the kitchen until dawn, ledger open, tracing the names. There were patterns in the dates. Some I remembered. Some I buried. All of them were about to be dug up again. And somewhere out there, a man with my daughter's voice on his recorder was waiting for me to take the next step. Morning made the ledger look smaller. It wasn't. The paper still had weight. Names stacked like bricks. Times that kept coming back to 1911, as if the clock itself had been recruited. I laid a city map beside it and started matching dates to calls I remembered. Bar fights, domestics, a hit-and-run that never resolved. Clay and Monroe sat on the page like a bruise. I drove there before my coffee cooled. The corner looked the same, just scrubbed. New tenants. New paint on the bodega. The alley was still a mouth between 2 buildings. I stood where I'd stood 3 years ago and watched the traffic pulse. A nail had been driven into the brick at kid height, fresh metal shining. Something dangled from it. A strip of blue painter's tape tied into a neat bow. Under it, taped to the wall, a photo in a sandwich bag. Me, from behind, my flashlight slicing the dark, my head turned away from the alley. Under the image, block letters. How long does it take to turn your head? My radio hissed with routine calls I wasn't part of. My personal phone buzzed. A picture from an unknown number. The same shot, digitally time-stamped. A second message arrived. Tonight, 1911. Storage. The green highlighter on the folded map from the lunchbox had made a loop around a strip of industrial units I knew too well. Mercury self-storage. Rows like teeth. Gates that worked when they felt like it. I spent the afternoon doing what I could without naming it. I called Carrie and moved her to a deeper shadow near Lena's sister's place. I told Lena to turn her phone to airplane mode and only text me through the app we'd used when the divorce was ugly. I walked my house again, top to bottom, and found a second lens inside the base of a lamp I'd owned for a decade. I stuck it to the neighbor's gutter with a magnet. If he wanted a show, I'd given the wrong stage. At 1857, I parked a block off Mercury and went on foot. The gate keypad wore a smear of grease and a tiny crescent of dried blue paint under the 3 key. I entered the fault code everyone in this town tries when they forget their own. 0317. And the gate slid back like it was on a joke. Rows of doors faced each other, mouths closed, metal corrugation shivering in a light wind. My breath fogged. Somewhere a dog barked like an alarm clock that had lost patience. Row 19 was labeled in stencil. Unit 11 had a paper tag half torn off. The same brass 3C key turned in its lock. I opened slow, weapon at low ready, light high. The unit smelled like cedar shavings and something sweet I didn't trust. Inside, a room had been staged. A twin mattress. A small lamp with unicorns on the shade. A bookshelf with battered paperbacks. On the wall, in blue painter's tape, letters made from careful strips. Bring them home. On the pillow sat a digital metronome, ticking a steady beat. Next to it, a cheap tablet leaned against a stuffed bear. It lit when it saw my face, front camera activated, and began playing a loop. My own front yard, filmed from across the street. Ethan throwing a ball straight up and catching it. Maya chalking the sidewalk with suns and crooked houses. The time stamp in the corner, 3 weeks ago. The angle a little higher than a car window. Tree branch height. I moved the bear and found an envelope taped under it. Inside, a Polaroid of Lena from last year, tilted back laughing at something I can't remember. Across the bottom in block letters. SHE doesn't laugh with you anymore. On the other side, Lucas Garcia's mother still cries. Ask her for the box. The phone vibrated in my jacket. I didn't bother to pick it up. I let it speak into the room. You see how lovely they look when they're framed, he asked. But screens lie. Every angle flatters, if you choose it. Walk to the back. The rear of the unit had another door. Interior, not standard. It slid back to reveal a second space, narrower, the walls covered in soundproofing foam, like a podcast closet. A camcorder sat on a tripod, facing a plain chair. On the floor was a taped X. On the seat, a sheet of paper. Stand here. Apologize to Lucas's mother. Say his name correctly. I didn't step onto the X. You want a performance. I want the right thing done the wrong way, he said, almost cheerful. To teach you how ugly it looks when you do it for the camera. Don't worry. This isn't live. My light picked a new shape on the far wall. My badge number, traced in blue tape, a neat outline. Below it, a child's lunchbox that wasn't my son's. Dinosaurs. A note taped to it. For when you're hungry. Inside, protein bars, a bottle of water, and a folded page from my own report on Lucas Garcia, circled sentences bleeding red through thin paper. Why Lucas? The name left a taste like a coin. Because he called, he said, and you logged it as a disturbance, and he stopped existing for you. Because his mother put a box by the door of his room and told herself the knock would come any minute. It never did. Do you like the metronome? It's set to your resting heart rate. It's slower than you think. The tick drilled into my jaw. I walked back to the bedroom. On the nightstand sat a second burner. It lit itself, a video window opening to someone's hand, setting down today's paper on a kitchen table I knew intimately. Lena's sisters. The camera stepped back. A white sedan rolled slow outside the lace curtain. The angle shifted to the door. A shadow stopped just long enough to breathe, then kept going. The video ended with a freeze frame on the deadbolt. My chest squeezed. I keyed the radio hard enough to wipe my knuckles. 23, status at the secondary. Quiet. The voice snapped in my ear. 1 call and I call. 2. We both know who returns voicemails faster. I stare at the tablet showing my yard, at the unicorn lamp that wasn't my daughter's but might as well be, at the taped letters asking me to roll all of this back like time is a dial I can turn. The anger came up hot and clean, but I kept the cap on. He wanted to boil. He wasn't getting it. What's next? I asked. You're going to knock on a door you've avoided, he said, tone cooling again. You'll go to 4407 North Hemlock, and you'll ask for Mrs. Garcia. You'll say you're sorry, and this time you'll stay until she's done speaking. She'll give you a box if you're very brave. You'll bring it back here tomorrow, 1911, and open it on the X. If you do, you'll get your next minute. If you don't, I send stills to Maya's teacher and to your captain. Only a taste, of course. We don't want to ruin the ending. A scrape outside the unit bled to the roll-up door, boot on gravel, a breath cut off. I killed my light and flowed to the side, weapon up, angle clean on the sliver near the floor. A shadow moved across it, then stopped. The metronome ticked. The shadow went the other way. Quick. I ripped the door up and pushed out into the aisle. Row 19 stretched right and left, fluorescent tubes buzzing overhead. To the left, a figure slipped behind a corner, gray hoodie, work gloves, a half mask you could buy for sanding drywall. I ran. The aisle magnified my footsteps, turned them into someone else's. At the corner, I cut my light, took the angle. Empty. A metal door slammed hollow 3 rows over. Then nothing but the buzz. I stood there breathing the stale cold and realized he'd given me exactly what he wanted. A silhouette and a chase, proof from my own nerves that he had a body. I walked back, slower. On the keypad by the exit, a dab of blue paint had been pressed into the seam like a fingerprint from a ghost. He wanted me to know he could touch anything. Outside the gate, my phone buzzed again. A screenshot bloomed on the screen. A neighborhood forum post with my yard in the background and 2 blurred figures chalking suns. Caption: "Does anyone know these kids? They're so cute." Beneath it, his text: "First spoonful. Full bowl if you're late." I drove without remembering turns. At a red light, I called Carrie on the secure app. Status: "White sedan's a lift," she said. "Driver ID checks out. Your people are good. Doors locked, blinds shut." I moved across the street. Whoever filmed that had to be on the sidewalk or in a car. I'm watching both. "Stay dark," I said. "If you have to move, call my personal, not the radio." Copy. I went home to a house that wasn't mine tonight. Just a set, a bundle of wires I couldn't trust. I took the Polaroid from Mercury and taped it above my desk next to the photo of my academy class. I laid the ledger open to the page with Lucas's name and wrote the address he'd given 3 years ago, North Hemlock. I said out loud to hear whether it still tasted like regret. Then I put my badge in my pocket and my hand on the door. It was late to knock on a mother's door. It was later to learn how to listen. I parked half a house down from 4407 North Hemlock and sat with the engine off until the ticking of the block cooled into the stillness of the street. Porch lights threw weak cones across cracked concrete. A wind chime worried itself into a tune and then gave up. Someone had taped a paper angel to the front window. Its wings were curling. I walked up the path and took my cap off before I knocked. It's a small thing, but it matters. The knock sounded too loud in the cold. I heard the tread of slippers, the rattle of a chain. The door opened on the chain first. A woman looked at me through the gap. Late 50s, maybe. Hair pulled tight under a scarf, eyes that had learned every shade of tired. "Mrs. Garcia?" I said. "I'm Officer Flores." It felt wrong saying it here. I tried again. "I'm Dennis. I should have come 3 years ago." The chain slid. She studied my face like a test she didn't want to grade. "You're late," she said, matter of fact, and stepped back to let me in. The house smelled like cumin and laundry detergent. A small TV murmured in the next room. On the far wall, framed photos made a grid. Baby, little boy, teenager, a gap where a cap and gown should have been. We stood in the narrow entry until she pointed toward the kitchen. "Sit," she said, and I did. The table had a plastic cloth with strawberries, cut by years of plates. She poured coffee that had been sitting too long, and didn't ask if I took sugar. I didn't correct anything. I wrapped my hands around the heat and kept my mouth shut. "You were at Clay and Monroe," she said, not a question. "You turned your head the wrong way." I nodded. The word sat in my throat and didn't know how to come out. He followed her, she said, eyes on the cup in her hands. "My boy, he followed the girl who ran back into that building. He told me later. He didn't want her to be alone with that man. He told me he saw a car with no lights. He told me he tried to get your attention. Her eyes came up to mine then, steady. He said you didn't look." "I didn't," I said. There was no inventory big enough for the things I hadn't done. "I'm sorry." She let the words hang there until they were real. "He called next morning," she went on, voice flat with the muscle memory of telling this story. "He said he wanted to give a statement. He said he had a plate, maybe half of one. He told the lady he'd wait by the phone. No one called. He left me a note." She stood, walked into the hall, came back with a shoebox the color of old sky. She set it on the table as if it weighed more than cardboard should. On the lid, in neat black marker, for the knock. "I've had this by the door since the second day," she said. "I told myself when they came I wouldn't make them stand on the porch like we were selling something. But they didn't come." She pushed it toward me. "You can open it." The lid lifted on the smell of paper and a ghost of his cologne. Inside, everything a mother collects when she's trying to hold a boy together. A lanyard from a diner, punch cards for coffee, a folded paper with a phone number and the word officer scribbled above it, a thumb drive in a sandwich bag, a spiral notebook with a cartoon tiger on the cover, a scrap torn from a receipt with block letters, WA7J, and the rest smudged with sweat, a cheap phone with a spiderweb screen. She watched my hands. "He didn't use," she said, and it wasn't defensiveness. It was a jurisdictional claim. The coroner said fentanyl. They always say fentanyl. Lucas was afraid of needles. He fainted when the nurse tried to give him a shot when he was 12. He would not have done that to himself. When I went to morgue and the man used his gentle voice to tell me how boys are, I told him boys are the way they are taught to be, and nobody taught my son to die in a parking lot. The muscle in my jaw ticked. "I believe you." The words were smaller than the room. "Do you mind if I held up the thumb drive. "Take it," she said. I made 3. One for the detective who never came. One for the man who called last week to tell me the date. Her hand tightened on her cup. He said a knock would come tonight. He said to give the box to the man without the hat. He said to make him sit down first and let me finish. I thought it was a trick. I almost didn't open the door. The back of my neck went cold. He had built this, too. The timing, the ritual, the fact that I'd taken my cap off on the porch without thinking. Did he say his name? No. He sounded like he had 2 voices, and neither of them fit. She took a breath. He asked me if I was still paying attention. I told him I never stopped. I clicked the cheap phone awake. Locked. I set it aside. I opened the spiral notebook. On the first page, Lucas had written his schedule in slanted blue ink. On the second, he had written a short account. 2:07 a.m. Saw silver car, no lights. Girl crying. Guy yelling. Walked behind them. Car circled. Tried to get officer on corner. He was talking to them. Decided to wait. Car backed into alley. Plate maybe 7J? 26? Car smelled like paint. He had underlined smelled like paint twice. I took out my own pen and wrote the line on my forearm under the other notes. Smelled like paint. Do you mind if I photograph these pages? You can take the whole thing, she said. I don't want to give you pieces. I don't want you to say the missing page is the one that mattered. I'm not going to lose this. I sounded like a man negotiating with himself. She looked at me a long second and then nodded. Say his name, she said, before you go. Lucas, I said. It sat right in my mouth and wrong in the air. Lucas Garcia. You will come back, she said, not softer, but something else. Not because that man with the split voice told you to. Because you owe me. Because you owe him. I will, I said. This time I meant it with more than my badge. A clock in the living room chimed the quarter hour and made us both blink like something had broken. I stood, and she rose with me. At the door, she put her hand on the knob and then on my sleeve. My son liked to fix old radios, she said. He could tune a station no one else could find. He told me once the trick was to stop turning the dial before the static went away. He said if you listen through the noise, the voice comes clearer. She swallowed. You have to listen through the noise. I hear you, I said, and this time the words were big enough. Thank you for waiting for the knock. When I stepped back onto the porch, the cold bit harder. A sedan idled 3 houses down, a shape behind the wheel barely there. I memorized the silhouette and wrote the partial as it slid away without headlights, turned the corner, and was gone. On the mailbox post, a smear of blue painter's tape flapped, half torn, like a flag that didn't belong to this house. I carried the box to my car like a person. I didn't open it again until I was parked under a busted streetlight with the heater on low. The thumb drive held a single folder with the date of the night Lucas died. Inside, A grainy doorbell clip that gave me a silver coupe creeping past with its lights off, a shape in the driver's seat, wearing a baseball cap, the shine of something on the rear bumper where the paint didn't match. Another file was audio. Lucas's voice reading his notes into a recorder, stumbling over the plate, apologizing to a future he couldn't see. At the end of the file, there was a catch in his breath, like he'd looked up, a car door thumped somewhere out of frame. Then a voice I knew too well drifted in from far away, smiling through filter. "Are you paying attention now?" The clip ended. My own reflection was a ghost in the windshield. I set the phone on the dash and watched the second hand on the clock drag itself toward 1911. Tomorrow I had to stand on a taped X and open this box in a storage unit built to look like my daughter's room for a man who thought he was teaching me to listen. Tonight, I had a mother's voice in my ear and a boy's ink on my skin and a city that was starting to talk if I could stand the static. I started the car and drove home in the slow lane with the lights on. I treated the box like a live wire. I made a clone of the thumb drive and a cookie tin I use as a Faraday cage, then watched the doorbell clip frame by frame until my eyes watered. The coupe's rear bumper had a patch the size of a hand, where the silver went dull and flat, primer, not paint. The license plate frame had a torn dealer decal. 2 letters showed clean in one frame when the car rolled under a streetlight PO. It could have been Poppy's Proline Porter. Half a fish story is still a fish. On Lucas's cheap phone, the screen was locked, but it popped open at the SIM tray. No micro SD. I put in the tin anyway. The notebook I photographed page by page. The smudge where his sweat had blurred the second digit, making me want to press my thumb there and unblur time. I called Carrie on the landline we keep for storms. He put me on a stage. I said, "Mercury. Today, he wants me to perform." "Then we rewrite the script," she said. "I'll be where you can't see me." "No radios," I said. "No radios," she echoed. "Say the word, library, if you need me to break rules." I spent the afternoon with the ledger until the columns stopped being ink and became a map. 3 other entries near Clay and Monroe were circled with the same pressure Lucas used to underline smelled like paint. Same week, same time of night, same half-mile radius. Someone had been cycling a route like a man testing an alibi. I made a list of body shops that would have sprayed silver in the weeks after and stared at it until I could hear the whoosh of a paint booth in my head. At 1852, I parked a block over from Mercury, wrote 1911 on my forearm again like I could brand a minute into my skin, and walked in. The same gate code, the same buzz, the same aisle of corrugated mouths. Unit 19, 11's lock turned for my key like it had been cut yesterday. Inside, the set waited. The unicorn lamp, the metronome clicking my pulse, the taped letters on the wall asking for miracles. The inner room was exactly as I'd left it. Chair, taped X, camcorder's glass eye waiting. I held the box from Mrs. Garcia at my side like a weight and stood off the X. "I'm here," I said to the room, to the camera, to him. The burner in my coat lit itself and jellyfished its way to speaker. "On the X," he said, patient like a coach in the 3rd inning. "We both know you'll test me until you believe the line can move. It can't. On the X." I stepped forward until the tape bit my boots. The chair creaked when I sat. He let the metronome tick 5 times before he spoke. "Say his name," he said. "Lucas Garcia." I said, apologized to his mother. Not like a cop, like a man. I pictured her hands around the warm cup, the cardboard box on the table like a headstone. "Mrs. Garcia," I said, and my throat tightened around the Mrs. the way it always does with women who have carried too much. "I'm sorry I didn't come when your son asked me to. I'm sorry I turned my head. I'm sorry I made you wait by your door with a box. I hear you." The chair was too small to hold the rest. "Better," he said, as if taste-testing grief, and it took everything I had not to throw the chair at the camcorder and call him into the aisle. "Open the box." I set it on my knees and peeled the lid. He couldn't have known what was inside when he gave the instruction, but he'd anticipated the shape of my hesitation, the way my fingers wanted to stall. Under the notebook and the cheap phone and the punch cards, taped aside like a secret, was a small transistor radio. Lucas's. the plastic worn smooth where a thumb had learned the dial. I took it out. A post-it fluttered loose from the back. Listened to the noise. "Turn it on," he said. I did. The speaker spat AM static, warm and furry. I rolled the dial slow. Spanish talk shows blur with preachers and farball games. My thumb stopped when the static thinned but didn't disappear. Something hit under it. A hum. A cheap loop. A rough-lipped voice pressed through a transmitter that had no business existing. The metronome ticked in time with a carrier wave. I lifted the radio closer. The voice resolved like a photo in a chemical bath. "Are you paying attention now?" he said, and I felt a ridiculous urge to say yes aloud to a piece of plastic. "Keep the dial there," he continued. "If you move it, you'll lose me. You see how easy it was for him to build this? A child, a handful of parts. A signal thrown 3 blocks with a coat hanger and a prayer. He left you a ladder, and you never climbed it. Sad." "I'm climbing," I said to the empty room. "I'm here." "Yes," he said, almost fond. "And because you are, you get a minute. Behind the chair, inside the wall, there's a panel. Pull it. Your hand will find something my hand's placed. That's your next step." I stood, set the radio down where the X split, and palmed along the acoustic foam until I found a seam. The panel gave with a dry sigh. Inside, in a shallow cavity, sat a paper bag folded twice. My name was written on it in block letters that could have been printed by a machine. Inside the bag, a scrap of vinyl with adhesive on the back, part of a dealership's license frame. P.O. The letters clean where the rest had been torn. Below them, smaller, AINT and body. The cut line showed where the next letters would have been. I didn't need the rest. "Say it," he said. "Porter Paint and Body." I said, "The shop off Maple, 2 miles from Clay and Monroe." The owner had been cited twice for spraying without proper ventilation. The place always smelled like solvent and desperation. "Good," he said. "You're learning to read. Now, for your last trick of the night, leave the radio on. Leave the box open. Walk away. If you try to make it neat, I'll know you're still acting. If you try to be clever with your own eyes hidden in mine, I'll show a teacher what you keep on your mantle. Go to Porter's. Stand on the sidewalk. Use your nose. Don't go in. If you go in, you'll step on your own evidence. I know because I have. We don't want to smudge the story." The metronome ticked. The radio breathed. The camcorder watched like a third eye. "If I walk out that door," I said, "you'll follow me there." "You sound afraid, officer," he said, not mocking. "Not anything. Not of me. Of what your boots will remember when you stand where a boy stood and breathe pain instead of help. Go." I took the bag and slid it into my coat. I left the radio where it crackled. Lucas's dial catching a ghost station that was only ours. I left the box open like a mouth. In the aisle, I felt the night eyes on me, real or remembered. At the gate, the code worked. On the sidewalk, the air cut clean and tasted like frost. My phone buzzed once. A map pin dropped on my screen without a number attached. Porter's, with a time in the corner that wasn't 1911. 2003. He was moving the minute, seeing if I could follow without turning my head the wrong way this time. I cut south. 2 turns, stopped 1 block early. I texted Carrie the single word. Library. A moment later, a dot on my map 2 roofs over. I took the rest on foot, cold chewing my ears. Porter's looked closed, but paint shops never sleep. A thin ribbon of light under the big roll-up door, the undernote of fans behind the walls. The sign above the door was 3 bulbs short. The P.O. still glowed. I stood on the sidewalk, hands in my pockets, the ledger biting my back, and breathed. He wanted my nose. He wanted me to smell what Lucas had written. Solvent, yes. Primer, yes. Under it, something sweet, almost fruity, not Body Shop, paint thinner cut with gasoline. Cheap work. The kind a guy does in a hurry in the dark to wash the gilt off a bumper. My mind laid the primer patch from the doorbell clip over the roll-up door in front of me. A shadow moved inside, stepped to the seam, paused. The door made a noise like a man trying not to cough. I didn't move. If he wanted me to go inside, He would have told me to. I stood where a boy had stood and smelled what he'd told me to smell. I listened through the noise. Somewhere in the shop a radio, not ours, played a country song about a truck that would never die. A compressor kicked. The fan wobbled on its bearings. The shadows stepped back and the ribbon of light thinned. My phone breathed once more. A photo bloomed. My boots on the sidewalk. My shadow on Porter's door, taken from across the street. Caption, good. Tomorrow, 1911. Bring what she gave you. I walked away slowly, feeling the gravity of the building hold me a second longer than it should before it let go. I didn't go back to Porter's in daylight. I wanted to. I wanted to walk in, badge up, and turn the place over until primer dust turned to confetti. Instead, I did what he was teaching or taunted me to do. I listened through the noise. I called in sick on paper and healthy in practice. I burned copies. The ledger, the doorbell clip, the audio of Lucas reading to a future that didn't arrive. I gave one thumb drive to Carrie with the same instructions Lena gave the kids' babysitter the first time we left them alone. No visitors, answer no unknowns. She didn't smile. You're walking into a theater at 1911, she said. Seats are filled before you get there. I know, I said. Take the aisle. At 1906, I parked a block away from Mercury and walked in with a box under my arm. The temperature had dropped. The corrugated mouths of the storage units exhaled white whenever a draft found a seam. My key turned. The unicorn lamp glowed tired and small. The metronome ticked my pulse down to something you could read on a page. I set the box on the chair and stood off the X. On, he said, before I got the burner out. The radio in Lucas's box hummed itself awake when my hand brushed it. Static. Then the varnished voice sliding into clarity, like it had been sitting in the room the whole time. On the X, he repeated. You don't have to love it. You just have to stand there. I stepped onto the tape. The camcorder's red light winked like an eye that had given up blinking. Say his name, he said. Lucas Garcia, I said, and it felt less like a password and more like a door. Open what she gave you, he said. All of it. The box lid already knew the shape of my hands. I lifted the radio and set it so the speaker breathed on the X. I took the Tiger notebook. The last page had stuck to the backboard with some old spill. When I peeled away, the cardboard flexed and a seam lifted. False bottom. My thumbnail caught the edge and a flat parcel slid into my palm. Black felt, a thumb-sized key fob inside with chipped metal logo that had been rubbed almost blank. Under the felt, a strip of adhesive with gray foam, still clinging to it in a neat rectangle, like it had once been mounted and then ripped off. You'll like this trick, he said, pleased with himself the way a kid is when a coin disappears. It's the other half of the thing you smelled. The fob had one button. I didn't press it in the unit. Put the notebook back, he said. Leave the box open. Take the fob. I palmed it and slid it into my coat next to the bag with the torn license frame. P.O. and a promise. I didn't ask how he knew the false bottom was there. I didn't ask whether he'd placed it or simply prepared a mother to find a mother's way. I didn't have anything left to spend on questions. Now, he said warm, almost, go stand where the boy stood. At Porter's, the air had a bite of solvent and cold steel. I cut through the lot one block over and came up the alley that runs the fence line. The back lot was fenced with chain link that remembered a taller dog. I stepped where someone else's boots had stepped until my heels fell into their prints like a dance step I hadn't learned, but my body knew. The fob was heavy for its size. I pressed it once. Somewhere in the dark a car chirped. Not the polite beep of a modern alarm. An older sound, shriller. To my right, a tarp shivered. I followed the sound around the dumpster with paint lid rings stacked on its crown like coins. The tarp was bungeed over a shape in the corner of the lot. I slipped the bungees one by one. The tarp sloughed off. Silver coupe. Primer patch on the bumper, exactly where the doorbell clip. Remembered it. Dealer frame cracked at the bottom. Port smudged with gray. The fob in my hand was a half-dead tooth. I pressed again. The lights didn't flash. The trunk thumped and didn't lift, latch but offering. A strip of duct tape ran across the seam like a bad conscience. My gloved fingers found the corner and peeled. The adhesive fought, and then gave with a sound that made my skin crawl. Library. I whispered, not to a mic, just to the dark, and trusted that somewhere two roofs over Carrie would break her own heart and a rule if she had to. The trunk opened slow, the hydraulics reluctant. Cold air spilled from the cavity and brought the smell with it. Paint, yes, and something sweet that had ridden in a bag at Mercury, now older, iron crawling under the sugar. I lifted the lid the rest of the way with the heel of my hand and angled my light low. No body, plastic sheeting taped along the inner walls, folded over itself into tidy petals. A painter's coverall balled in the corner, white gone gray, crusted at the cuffs with a brown black that had oxidized into memory. A battery-operated desk fan tipped on its side. A set of license plate screws in a plastic bag. A fuzz-felt rectangle on the underside of the trunk lid where a dealership badge had lived until someone tore it off and stuck it in a paper bag in a unit to show me a trick. And a music box, center, ballerina cracked where it had been cracked before. Still and waiting. I didn't touch it. The butt edge of the fan blades had hair caught in it. Light brown. I clicked my light off because I didn't want to see whether that was human or rope, and because sometimes you close your eyes to hear better. The alley breathed. From inside the trunk, on no cue that I could see, the music box wound itself twice and let go. The song was wrong by one note, off by a single tooth on the comb. The hair on my forearms lifted under the coat. Behind me, a scrape, a shoe on gravel corrected itself. I turned with the gun low and my own light off. So I wasn't a lighthouse. The alley was a patient mouth. A shape separated from the deeper shape of the fence, and then recombined. I didn't chase. The last time I chased, he shook a shadow 3 rows over and let me pan at an empty corner. I went back to the trunk and leaned, let the lid rest against my forearm so it wouldn't slam if somebody sneezed 3 blocks away. On the inside of the lid, ink had been scrawled across the metal, small, careful block letters pressed like someone had written fast, hunched over. Are you paying attention now? Under that, in a different hand, smaller, thinner strokes that bit at the paint. Another line. I tried. Lucas, or someone like him, had signed the car he died near or didn't. My stomach turned to something with edges. I took a photo, 2, 3, wide, detail, the hair in the fan, the screws in the bag, the curve of the primer edge where it had been feathered in a hurry. I took out a paper evidence bag and slid the cracked ballerina into it, because leaving it felt like leaving a name behind at a grave. You're doing well, his voice said near my ear, and for a second I thought he had stepped into the alley until a radio hum under my coat admitted it. The station held, the static rode the edge. The voice came through. Leave the coverall. Leave the fan. Fingerprints are greedy, and I'm not sharing yet. Take the screws, if you like, or take nothing. You're close. Come out, I said to the night, because the minute had stretched me thin enough to show bones. Say this without the radio. A soft laugh. Almost sorry. I don't come out for men who don't listen. Tomorrow you will bring the box again. Tomorrow you will stand where you stood, and you will read the page you skipped. I didn't skip. The one after the last, he said, and my mind fell into the seam in the Tiger notebook where the cardboard had flexed. The one where boys write in pencil because they think they can erase what comes next. He let the frequency drift 1 notch. The static swallowed him and left a small machine sound of the metronome in my head. A cat knocked something over 2 yards down. A light went on and off behind a shade. A truck changed gears on Maple and made the fence sing its cheap metallic note. I closed the trunk, pressed the tape back because the theater demanded props be in place when the curtain falls, and stepped away. My phone buzzed once. A photograph arrived, grainy and shot from waist height. A living room I recognized by the tilt of the lamp and the dent in the couch cushion. My kids asleep, head to head, mouth open the way siblings forget they hate each other when the day is done. The timestamp in the corner read now. Across the bottom, in red drawn with a finger. Good. 1 spoonful. No bowls tonight. I didn't realize I'd been holding my breath until I saw it fog the glass of the screen and vanish. Through the dark. 2 blocks over, a shadow detached from a roof line and dropped. Carrie, landing like an apology she didn't need to make. She came up next to me without touching me, her breath even. "You get what you needed?" she asked. "No," I said. It was true and not. I got what he wanted me to have. We walked away from Porter's without looking back. Behind us, the coupe sat under the winter starlight, primer shining dull as old bone. Somewhere inside the unit I'd left, a radio was still hissing, a little boy's dial exactly where he left it, a voice waiting in the static for a man to finally hear the next note.